Not a formula per se, but I think a process for assisting in fragile states does exist, and which we are familiar with. And that is really to focus on helping to build, first and foremost, government institutions, including security institutions, that are becoming more effective and are equally important, if not more important, regarded as legitimate and fair by the broad range of the population. Otherwise, you run into the risk of state capture. But those government and security institutions are part of that, because you always need a minimal level of security for everything else to proceed, whether it's a political process, economic activities, legitimate economic activities, or legal economic activities, and so on. So the focus, I think, regardless of what country you're in, should really be focused on that. To know how to do it, of course, requires quite sophisticated knowledge of the local environment. Because one of the things that we often miss in providing assistance is a good understanding of traditional ways of doing things. And if traditional ways of doing things, like solving conflicts, like adjudicating disagreements and so on, if they're not understood, we often try to supplant them with more, what we would consider more formal institutions, in which the local population may have little or no confidence, and which may not function very well. So it's important to understand how traditional mechanisms work, so that they can be an important source of resilience for the population and for the country, and if they're not a key source of the problem, should be built upon and strengthened in the stabilization-reconstruction process. So it's more processes that one should be attuned to, that you will find in every country, rather than a particular formula: do this, do this, do this. I would say in very high-profile cases, U.S. assistance has not been very effective in dealing with the strategic or critical vulnerabilities in those countries. U.S. assistance tends to be very fragmented across all sectors. There tends not to be a coherent strategy that is focused, as my colleagues always say, in different parts of the government, that if you're focused on more than 2 or 3 things, you're trying to do too much, and you will simply fragment your assistance and dilute the potential for positive impact. So I'd say we're much too fragmented, not strategic, and by and large, our people, our officials in these environments rotate in and out too quickly, do not really understand the local dynamics in a sophisticated way, do not understand the various actors, their incentives, the dynamics, as well as traditional means of dealing with problems that I mentioned before. Local knowledge is so important, because it's the ultimate currency for successful, constructive, or for, let's say, progress in these missions and constructive assistance is personal relationships. It's not technical. These are not, first and foremost, technical missions. They are much more an art than a science. And we tend to think too much in technical terms. And we tend to be evaluated too much on technical criteria. I think there are some very practical things that we can do. Given the existing foreign assistance legislation, it wouldn't require legislative changes to the mandates at all. But to really balance functional experts with country and regional experts, so we need to build up the cadre of country and regional experts, always pair functional and country experts, because there's none of our assistance is apolitical. everything we do in any country, even drilling a well, has political impact, affects the political dynamics. That's really important. So local knowledge, as I mentioned, but also local ownership is absolutely critical. We know from our history of providing assistance, if the locals do not think that what we're trying to do is important, it's not their priority, and secondly, they don't have the means to sustain it because at some point we will leave, it will simply disappear. We're often much too ambitious, try to address too many problems that we see, which locals may not see as problems. So local ownership is absolutely essential to sustainability and enduring progress.